Hi, everybody. Corrine Smith here once again, talking about books related to Henry David Thoreau and the conquered crowd of transcendentalists. And in this 17th episode of Studying Thoreau, we are going to focus on new books that came out in 2021. All right. So I'm also going to catch us up on some books that we missed in a previous episode. All right. If we haven't met yet, my name's Corine Smith. I was a librarian for a long time, written a couple of books about Thoreau. I currently serve as the supervisor of the Thoreau Society shop at Walden Pond in Concord, Massachusetts. This is my own series where I offer my own opinions of these resources, and so that you can decide whether you need them or not for your personal library, or if you want to borrow them from a library system and check them out on your own. And all of the books that I mention here today are featured in a bibliography on my website, travelswiththoreau.com. The link also appears in the summary below. And the links will be to either the shop or another distributor, or to books that we're catching up on that are older, that are out of print. The links will be to used book dealer sites. All right, so let's jump right in. And we're going to start with the category of fiction. Now, I know a number of you out there will say you don't want fiction, you want the real stuff, the historical stuff, the facts, the real data, the real stories. I get that, I really do. I still think it might be a good idea for you to know about these books, just in case you do want your imagination to run wild someday and suspend your disbelief and have your favorite characters put in situations that you had not imagined. All right, so I think it's worthwhile. And there's two categories here. We're going to start with historical fiction. And the book that came out this year of historical fiction is Conquered, a novel by Don Zancanella. And this takes place in Concord, obviously. There's the Barber print from the 1820s, colored. It looks nice. The book takes place in Concord from 1837 to 1842, and there are three main characters, and the chapters alternate among them, one after another, and it's Henry David Thoreau, Sophia Peabody, and Margaret Fuller. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And this is a time period of importance for all three of them. They're all three going through different things. Right? And for Thoreau, of course, that's after he graduates from Harvard and before he goes to Staten Island and then on to Walden Pond. The author does change a few names of real life people so that there's not confusion with similar people. And you should know that up front. But other than that, I think does a realistic job of portraying these people. And so that's Conquered, a novel. Came out earlier this year. Now, here's where I want to backtrack and catch us up on some books that I missed from the fiction episode. And some of these are from recommendations that savvy viewers told me I missed. Thank you, viewers. You guys are great. Okay, so one viewer brought to my attention Listen for the Voices, a novel of Concord by Anne Culver, came out in 1939. And here the action is set in the years 1848 to 1851 in Concord. Listen for the Voices. And the main character is a young woman named Mary Olive Shipman. Her father, Albert, is a teacher at one of the Concord academies. Her mother, Laura, is a librarian at the Concord Library. These people know the Alcotts and the Emersons. And so this is historical fiction, okay? With conversations and all. Listen for the Voices by Anne Culver. Okay, historical fiction, and it's a nice story. It's a nice story. And then something else I forgot in the fiction episode, I think because I wasn't sure whether I was going to put it in fiction or in young adult readers or young readers. And that's Two Rivers Meet in Concord. It really is two. My dust jacket has tears at the most important parts of the title. Two Rivers Meet in Concord by T. Morris Longstreth came out in 1946. And this is a coming of age story And the main character's name is Jim Minot. Great Concord name. Young Jim is trying to decide what direction his life should take. And so he asks advice of one of his good friends, Henry Thoreau. Now, this takes place in 1844. So this is just before Thoreau goes to Walden, or maybe he's starting to think about it. Okay, so in both of these books, a young person is the main character, and perhaps these were both back in the war years. These were both targeted at young people as a reading audience, but you can read them. They're both really nice books. They follow historic facts as best as they would have then, and I don't think, young adult novels were not a genre back in the war years. So actually drawing attention to Concord at all back then, that's pretty good. That's as fandom for Thoreau and Concord was really starting to take off, right? So yeah, so these are decent books. And even if the young people are as the main characters, you can still read them. Anybody can read them. Okay, they're still good stories. Okay, so that's historical fiction that we caught up on. Can't talk. And now we're going to turn to contemporary fiction, meaning that the action takes place generally around the same time period that the author is writing the book. And here we are doing another catch-up. Again, a savvy viewer told me about The Harvester by Gene Stratton Porter. And that's Gene, G-E-N-E. And she, if you don't know Gene Stratton Porter, was an important writer, a well-known writer in Indiana. And a lot of her books are set in Indiana. She was also into nature studies. Okay. And so this is The Harvester by Gene Stratton Porter. Came out in 1911. All right. So The Harvester is about a man, and I don't think he has a name. I don't remember her name ever being mentioned. And so he lives away from town. He lives out in the woods by himself. He harvests herbs and he sells them. Okay, so he's sort of a Thoreau character in that he lives away from people and he's got an interest in nature. But here's where it turns differently. He gets the idea of who the perfect female companion could be for himself. And then he spots her and he tracks her down and tries to convince her that she needs to be with him, yada, yada, yada. It turns into a romance, which is cool, Now, Thoreau, I'm pretty sure, I read this a while ago, I'm pretty sure Thoreau is absolutely never mentioned in the book. But the reason this is being mentioned now is that Gene Stratton Porter dedicates the book to Henry. Now, sort of. What happens is it's on the dedication page, but it's not really a dedication. Let me read to you what she wrote. This portion of the life of a man of today is offered in the hope that in cleanliness, poetic temperament, and mental force, a likeness will be seen to Henry David Thoreau. She wrote this in 1911. Isn't that cool? She was born during the Civil War. So she was one of those people who read Thoreau early without having any connection to him, right? And she's out in Indiana. So maybe she got the access to the 20-volume set in 1906 and read all that. But is that not cool? 1911 mention of Thoreau, The Harvester by Gene Stratton Porter. It's a fun read too. But yeah, just that early reference. You just never know who Henry Thoreau is going to influence and when. I think that's the lesson there, don't you? Speaking of contemporary fiction, a book that came out this year, All Honest Pilgrims by Maria Valente, a novel. Okay, and here she also has it that the chapters alternate between characters. There are 8 characters in all, 8 main characters in all. There's a core of 3 or 4 that repeat over and over. And so the chapters alternate among those characters. And the action takes place mostly in the last 20 years in our time period, over time, with characters who have somehow been impacted by something that Thoreau wrote. And you know how disparate threads sometimes eventually come together. Maybe that happens in this book. This is Walden. Maybe some of them get to Concord. We'll see. Okay, all Honest Pilgrims, contemporary fiction that came out this year. Now, moving on to memoirs or personal essays, whatever you want to call them, I suppose. Okay, in April, we got Quiet Desperation, Savage Delight, Sheltering with Thoreau in the Age of Crisis by David Gessner. David is a prolific environmental and nature writer, and his format is usually personal essays. I showed you A Wild Rank Place that he wrote about Cape Cod during the travel episode. Yeah, and that was one of his books. And in A Wild Rank Place, he followed the footsteps of Thoreau on Cape Cod. Yeah, so here, taking into consideration this whole last year, David kept a journal. He's kept a journal a lot during his life. Good for you, David. I can't do that. And invoking Thoreau, as a number of people have written articles that way this past year, thinking of Henry in this time of seclusion somehow, and solitude and isolation, perhaps. And so David was first one to come out with a book about that. And David lives in North Carolina, so a lot of the action happens there, and you get to see the habitat of where he's living and his writer space. And he also comes up to Cape Cod and Walden, remembers other travels and people who have been important to him. And it's kind of ruminations, personal essays, invoking Henry. Quiet Desperation, Savage Delight. Thank you, David. And then in October, we got an anthology called Now Comes Good Sailing, Writers Reflect on Henry David Thoreau, edited by Andrew Blonner. Thank you, Andrew. And 27 people have contributed to this book. And so, so there are personal essays, memoirs, a little bit of research kinds of things. It's as though you are in a room with Thoreau fans, and you just go around and you hear people's origin stories, or how they feel about Henry's philosophies, or they found a nugget or a reference to him that they followed the thread of, all kinds of different stories. It's almost as though you are at the Thoreau Society annual gathering in July in Concord, except that a lot of these people don't ever come to the AG, and they don't hang out with we Thoreau fans, us Thoreau fans, on a regular basis. So that's what makes this special. The variety of people, different voices from different places. It's really interesting. And of course, it's one essay after another. If one doesn't resound with you, you can go on to the next one. You don't have to read them in order. You can read them if you know people you can read theirs first, or save theirs for last as dessert. So Now Comes Good Sailing, Writers Reflect on Henry David Thoreau. A new book of poetry came out this year, and we did have an episode of Studying Thoreau on poetry. And this is Echoes from Walden, poems inspired by Thoreau's life and work, edited and compiled by David Califf, who is a poet himself in Connecticut. And so what David's been doing in the last couple of years is trying to track down every poem that was ever written about Thoreau or Walden, or was inspired by Thoreau or Walden the book or Walden Pond the place. He's been busy. And he found dozens, if not hundreds. Don't know how many he found. There are 53 in here. So he distilled them down to 53. And the book starts with two poems from Henry himself. And you probably know them. One is, you can probably guess which ones they are. One is I am a parcel of vain strivings. And the second one is, my life is the poem I would have writ. Okay, you probably could have guessed that. Then he moves on to people who knew Henry, his inner circle: Emerson, Channing, Daniel Ricketson, Louisa May Alcott. And then on to other people into contemporary times. And I am honored and fortunate to have one of my poems included in here. Thank you, David. And it is about Henry's time on Mackinac Island in 1861 when he's coming back from Minnesota. If you have the Thoreau at Mackinac book that I mentioned during the travel episode, it's the same poem in there. But here it's with other poems. It goes from Walden, and all kinds of different poetry formats. Again, from all kinds of different time periods. Maybe you'll be inspired to write your own poems. That'd be great. Thank you, David. Echoes from Walden. Okay. Onward, onward, ever onward. In this Studying Thoreau episode about quote books. Oh, do you remember that? Quote books. There are many Thoreau quote books over the years. I did statistical analysis one time, and I found out that about 25 books a year came out compiled with Thoreau quotes. Some matched with pictures, some on a theme. You know, I don't think it's that many anymore, but there are a lot. There are a lot. And one that I focused on a lot in that episode is the groundbreaking coffee table book, In Wildness is the Preservation of the World, which pairs Thoreau quotes with the full color photographs of Eliot Porter. Came out in 1962 on the 100th anniversary of Henry Thoreau's death by the Sierra Club. A masterful work at its time. One of the first coffee table books, if not the first coffee table book. And full color photographs wasn't possible before this, okay, in publication. So it is a publication masterpiece as well as a Thoreauviana masterpiece. Pairing Thoreau quotes with attribution, that's always important, you know that. Don't tell me that Henry just wrote that, tell me where he wrote it, right? Okay, and yeah, and that's In Wildness is the Preservation of the World. Obviously, taking its title as inspiration from the essay, Walking. Okay, good thing you're not here to smell this book because it's aromatic, smells like it was in a basement. This is my old copy, you can tell, and it was in a basement for a while. My old copy of the 1962 classic. It was reprinted in this format a couple of times. If you go back to my quote books episode, I said it then because I found some in libraries from the 80s and 90s, maybe, exactly in this format, reprinted exactly this way. And also, oh, and back in the day, not only was this a monster book in many ways, it cost $25. What an expensive thing at a time when you could get a paperback novel for under $1. This was 25. Are you kidding me? Wow. That was an investment in 1962. It also came out around that time in paperback, $3.95, certainly much more manageable, but exactly the same book, just published in paperback, exactly the same way. So imagine my surprise when I found out that it got reprinted again this year and in another format, in a third format. Look at this beauty. In Wildness is the Preservation of the World, a hardback, a cloth hardback in green with gilt letters of the title on the front and on the spine. And it's exactly, and it's from Chronicle. Thank you, Chronicle. I didn't know you were going to do this. What a lovely surprise. Same photographs, same quotes. They recast the quotes in a more contemporary format and font, still has attributions. It is the same work. It is the same work. Oh my goodness. In Wildness is the Preservation of the World. And $24.95, 5 cents less than the coffee table book was in 1962. It's beautiful. It's more manageable than the coffee table book. Now, I still think you should have copies of the original. You're a Thoreau collector, Thoreau fan. You've got your own Thoreau library. I think you need one of the originals. And the big one is usually easy to get from a used book dealer. At this point in time, condition is the problem, with how much time has passed. Condition is not a problem with this brand new one. Isn't it beautiful? From Chronicle. Thank you, Chronicle. Get one of them at least for me, okay? Not for me, for you. Suitable as giving as a gift for yourself or someone else, right? In Wildness is the preservation of the world. And it keeps coming. Now, I mentioned that you might get inspired to write poetry with that poetry book. Are you a writer? Do you keep a journal like David Gessner? If so, do you know about a novel journal, the Walden Edition? This came out several years ago. Again, we're catching up. I don't know what category I would put this in anyway. At its core, it is a blank book. It is a journal that you can write in. It has a leather or leather-like cover. It's wonderful to touch. Obviously, a blank book that you can write in. Beautiful. Except here's the key. It is the Walden Edition. So now I know my camera's going to strobe on this, and I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see it. These are not lines. These are in teeny, tiny print, the first couple of chapters of Walden. Teeny, tiny print. So that as an aspiring writer, you can write between the words of your favorite author. Is that not cool? Is that not cool? A novel journal, the Walden Edition. It came out, I don't know, 2016, 2018. And I think it's not available from the publisher anymore. I think it's out of print. I bought this one off of eBay. So I would check there. The link that I'm going to give you is to used book dealers. Now, that doesn't mean somebody's already written in them. Okay. That just means it's passing ownership from one person to another in its original format. They wouldn't sell you one that somebody had already written in. It is just so cool. And Walden is just one of the options in their series. They have other authors that you could choose from. But a novel journal. And the quote, the Thoreau quote on the front is, "Things do not change, we change." So if you are a journal writer, here you go. I, as I said, am not a journal writer, and I probably won't ever write in this, but I had to have it. Do you know what I mean? I think you do if you're watching this program. A novel journal. See if you can find it out there. Check on eBay first and then go look at the link that I provide for you. There are copies out there, and they're pretty inexpensive too. Okay. Now, of course, the big book this year, both literally and physically, is The Transcendentalists and Their World by Robert Gross. Was released in early November. It is the long-awaited follow-up, the very, very long-awaited follow-up to The Minutemen and Their World, which first came out in 1976. So, what is this? 800 pages, first of all. Last 200 are notes, acknowledgments, and index. This is context, folks. This is context. You want to know what Concord was like for the people that we know and lived there, stuff that they never told us in their own writing? This is the history of Concord from 1790 to 1850. What happened in the town, how the town operated. Bob goes through, thank you, Bob, for doing this. Bob goes through every aspect of life: politics, religion, education, business, agriculture, social life, how the library got started, how the Lyceum got started. And he divides the book into two huge parts. And the first part is just what I told you. And our guys, you know what, are not even the main characters here. Henry shows up a bunch of times. And actually, in the first part, his father is one of the main characters, John Thoreau Sr. So if you think you know everything about Henry's father, no, you're going to learn things here. It just makes so much sense to learn the structure of the environment that these people were living in first. And then the second half of the book is getting into them. Okay, Emerson, Thoreau, the people that you want to know about. Keep in mind that the Alcotts didn't live in Concord early on. Okay, so if you're looking for Alcott stuff, but oh wow, this is a masterpiece too, a monumental work. And thank you, Bob. You spent a great deal of your life working on this, and we are grateful. We are grateful. Now, you're going to have to spend a great deal of time with this book, a huge chunk of time, or many, many, many little small chunks of time. It's well worth it. You will learn a lot. You will learn a lot. It's all about context. Thank you, Bob. So that's it for 2021. Now, I'm pretty sure there were some other academic books that came out this year. You want to tell me about them? Put them in the comments below. What I'm focusing on are, let's say, the everyday books for everyday people. Maybe. But there might be some other titles out there. So 21, what are we looking for in 2022? Well, already I know that in April, Ben Shattuck's book, 6 Walks in the Footsteps of Henry David Thoreau, is coming out. It's going to be in hardback. This is a paperback preview. And this is also in the memoir, personal essay kind of category, like David Gessner's book. Ben ruminates on this year and invokes Henry, and also follows some of Thoreau's footsteps on Cape Cod, up Wachusett, up Katahdin, a couple of other places. And so it's a narrative memoir. It's not a guidebook. You can kind of tell where he is, but he doesn't go step by step and tell you that, you know, you're going with him, but it's a narrative memoir. Okay, 6 Walks, coming out in April of 2022. And then, as always, we have our fingers crossed, right? Fingers crossed, guys, that 2022 will be the year we get Correspondence 3 from Princeton University Press. You know, we've had these 2 for a while now, the first 2. The third one, and these cover up to 1856. So you still have 5 years of Henry's life to find letters and that he wrote and that he received. And so the third one's going to be the last and final volume of this series within the entire Writings of Henry D. Thoreau series by Princeton University Press. Editor Bob Hudspeth told me more than a year ago, maybe more than a year and a half ago now, that he had given the manuscript, the finished manuscript, to the publisher, and so it was up to them. So wow, I was hoping it would be out by the end of December 2021. Doesn't look like that's the case. So fingers crossed, guys. Fingers crossed that we get the final volume of Correspondence. Okay, so that's what I've got to share with you today. Thank you for joining me. And there will be more Studying Thoreau episodes coming. There will also be more of my slideshows that I've done in public performances before, mostly about Thoreau's travels, obviously, and perhaps dividing up the Minnesota trip into different regions that are more likely than others. And that's my teaser for that. Okay. Again, feel free to leave comments below if I've missed something in 2021, or if you have reviews of your own of any of these books. Thank you to all the authors who provided us with reading material this year. You know, we needed it. And thank you to Chronicle for giving us another really nice in wildness is the preservation of the world. So yes, leave a comment. You can subscribe with the red button. You can ring the bell for notifications. You guys all know that stuff. You know the routine. So my name's Corrine Smith. Thank you again for joining me, and happy reading, everybody.